Good morning. We have a special treat for you. If you're really quiet, you can actually hear the seltzer streaming across the room, if your ears are good enough. So it's really with great pleasure to introduce my friend, my colleague, our board member, Barry Joseph, to you this morning. So in Barry's own words, and I'll try not to mess up how you say it, Barry is the world's leading seltzerologist. Okay, I didn't know there was such a thing, but he is the leading one. He's also the VP, in another world, the VP of Digital Experience. He has his computer all over here, so I can't read my thing. He's also the VP of Digital Experience at the Girl Scouts of the United States, where he is a driving force, and he truly is, both in youth development and digital learning there. Prior to Girl Scouts, he was the Associate Director at my favorite museum for digital learning at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and the founding director, where we first met Barry, of the online leadership program at Global Kids. He's a Covenant Foundation grantee, like most of you, who worked on the first Congregational School digital badging program. So we met Barry, I don't know, it must be 12, 13 years ago. It's a long time ago, and Barry became really our go-to around things digital. And it's done an enormous, it has done enormous work for the foundation, for the Jewish world. And without further ado, we will begin counting, actually. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sweetheart, what would you like to drink for dinner tonight?
Seltzertopia in your face. Putting baking soda in your space. Spinning combination, costless nation. Eleanor Cumberland came sensation. Semi-Zakin, Michael's making whips at you, and that's no faking. Seltzertopia in your face. Seltzertopia in your face. I don't do it. It makes it feel better without the lecture. Cornzopia, then you wish. Seltzertopia, vanilla strawberry. One time out. Cucumber cherry, I make them all mine. I choose you coffee now. Make no cheese, but fill up your car with the chocolate. In the end, it's a search that the destination. Wherever I look, I find carbonation. Now, the bubble burst down my tongue. Who knew what it tastes the fun? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Mark Kaiserman of the Reformed Temple of Forest Hills. It is my pleasure to invite one of the most brilliant and creative people I know up to the stage, the creator of Seltzertopia, the one, the only, Barry Joseph.
Welcome to the age of effervescence. And this morning, talk about seltzer. So, our seltzer for this morning, as we know, pulls from this portion. Pulls from this week's portion, which is about, as we all know, Moses carbonating the Red Sea with a seltzer siphon and a stick of pretzel. Just kidding. Good morning, everyone. It is so exciting for me to be here. I can't begin to tell you what it means for me, having been a previous grantee, as all of you, who have been to these incredible gatherings in the past, inspired by people who've been on stages like this, inspiring me, in part, to write something like Seltzertopia, getting to be here today to present to all of you. I want to thank the Covenant Foundation in so many ways that I can't even begin to list, or like the Oscars, they play some music to call me off. I'd like to thank all of you who I believe received a copy of the book last year, maybe gave it to one of your parents. Thank you. And to start, I need to get out a little seltzer. Would that be okay if I take a moment to get out a little seltzer? I always need a little seltzer to start. This is my little seltzer. I take it with me where I go, but in case you're disappointed, because you wanted something larger, I've got this beautiful French siphon as well, which I will leave over here, and feel free to look at it up close. There we go. I bring the small one with me on the road. It's my little good luck charm. All right. Is everybody ready to get started? Is everybody ready to get started? Excellent. I'd like to start then with a little poem.
Seltzer. River run through with sky. What are you if not a leaping up of joy from stillness? Enter Seltzertopia, land of the purest ambrosia. The sea becomes laden with bubbles, little needlepoint pricks as they pop. Perhaps lime, perhaps blackberry, perhaps soda stream easy on your own counter. But beyond it all is the call of the riverbed, dreaming up clouds.
Don't you love that? The call of the riverbed, dreaming up clouds. So this morning we talk about seltzer, but what does that mean exactly? An hour talk on seltzer, an entire book on seltzer? I'm really curious to know what you think we're going to be covering in this next hour. What is on your mind? What do you think can actually fill up this length of time? So I literally mean that. And so what I'd like you to do is turn to the person next to you and spend the next 15 seconds and say, is there a question you have about seltzer? Is there something you're hoping to hear about seltzer? And then I'll give you another 15 seconds to switch. So go. And switch if you haven't switched. All right. When you're ready, bring your attention back up here. And I'd like to get a volunteer from the back to share something that they just shared in their pair. So can I get a volunteer towards the back to share something they just shared? What's your name?
I'm Alex.
Hello, Alex.
Faith shared that she doesn't really like seltzer.
Oh. It's all right. It's a safe space. It's all right. Oh.
Let me finish, but that she's excited to learn more about it.
That's the open spirit we're looking for this morning. Thank you. Someone on this side want to share?
I'm curious about the defining features of seltzer. Like what makes something a seltzer versus a soda? What is club soda versus seltzer? If you could sparkling water.
Thank you. What's your name?
My name is Meg.
Thank you, Meg. So what are the defining features of seltzer? And we hear all these words. Are they seltzer? Are they something else? What is the difference? Thank you. Your name, please? Your name? Geet. Why? So she said, why is seltzer associated with Ashkenazi cuisine? Okay, maybe one more over here. Your name, please, first? Amy. Why do some seltzers have more bubbles? Oh, they like that question. It gets an applause. That's great. So during our time together this morning, I will promise you I will answer all of those questions, or I won't. And if I don't, it's your job to ask me during the Q&A so we can catch those up. But most of the things that you mentioned, we will be addressing at one point moving forward. So now that gets me from you to me. How do I end up here on this stage talking about seltzer? Who am I to call himself a seltzerologist? Well, it all started a decade and a half ago when I became known as the effervescent Jew, as the seltzer man. Not a seltzer man. I've never delivered seltzer, but the seltzer man. If you had a seltzer question and you were in the press, I was the one you called. Ring, ring. Hi, it's the Wall Street Journal. Hi, it's All Things Considered. Hi, it's CBS Morning News. We need to talk to you about seltzer.
Seltzer has been around for centuries, of course, but more people are drinking it today than ever before. The sparkling popularity is coming at the expense of traditional soda brands like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and others. Sales of their sugary drinks have fallen flat.
The sales surge is undeniable. Seltzer consumption is up 41% nationwide in the past 5 years, while soft drinks are down more than 8%. Canada Dry's sparkling seltzer is growing at 3 times the rate as its still water. Has seltzer come a long way?
Seltzer has had a remarkable history. So nowadays we're seeing not only a resurgence in seltzer, but an interest that I think is higher than at any point in American history.
This is a remarkable turnaround and resurgence, obviously. I mean, like in the golden age of seltzer.
Did anyone hear what happened there? I said seltzer has a resurgence. And then the news anchor said seltzer has a resurgence. How did I ever become the spokesperson for seltzer? Well, it started in 2004. I wanted to review a new product that had just come over from Israel that would let you make seltzer in your home. And that article started like this. Mixing Up the Spritz by Barry Joseph, December 31st, 2004. Like Chinese food and pickles, seltzer, that effervescent spirit, is often associated with Jews. An ad for an at-home seltzer maker touts its product as a part of the history of Jewish ingenuity. Matzah, circa 1440 BC. Chicken soup, circa 1280 AD. Homemade seltzer, 2004. I sought the advice of my doctor. The Jewish people suffer from 1,001 gastrointestinal problems, he said. But once they could burp, wow. Unfortunately, since my doctor is also my father, it wasn't clear whether he was referring to all Jews or just to me and to my family. The Israeli-owned Soda Club manufactures the soda maker in its Jerusalem plant. It is a surprisingly simple device. The night before our Hanukkah party, after hours frying latkes, my wife and I decided to try it out. If this actually worked, if this machine can turn my Brooklyn tap water into seltzer, it would feel as miraculous as one night's worth of oil lasting for 8 days. And so began my exploration of seltzer, and where it would have ended as well if I hadn't done one thing. I included my email address at the bottom, and I said, send me your seltzer stories. And people did. I got emails day after day, people recounting that excitement of seeing that truck coming by with that seltzer man ready to deliver those new, fresh siphons, of siblings spraying each other with those seltzer siphons, of people mixing egg creams. But then one person simply emailed me and said, call me. I thought, why can't you email me like everyone else? But I'm a nice guy, so I called her, and she said she wanted to tell me something about seltzer and would take me out to lunch. A free lunch, I wasn't going to pass it up. So we met, and I never heard of her before. You might know her. Her name is Carolyn Hessel. Many people refer to her as the Jewish Oprah. She worked at the Jewish Book Council and had created the Jewish Book Council Network, the place to be in the circuit if you have a Jewish book theme or you're a Jewish author yourself. And it turned out she thought there could be a whole book on the subject. This was the days of the microhistory. Do you remember this? There was a book called Salt, a book called Cod. You know, one-word titles that were going to tell you about the whole history of the world. Why can't there be a book about seltzer? She said to me. And in my head, I knew the answer. That piece that I wrote, I don't know if you can tell, I'm not going to say I made half of it up, but I was interviewing my dad. There was nothing out there on seltzer. Half of the article was anything that any of you could have found at the time on Google, right? It was just, no one knew much. There was no books on seltzer. There was no documentaries on seltzer. So I thought, you're crazy. How can I write a book on seltzer? But like many things, she wasn't crazy. She was right. And she said, go think about it. See if you can come up with an idea and come talk to me, and I'll give you some advice. Pardon me one second. So what I did is I walked around the streets of New York City, not with this, but a microphone that I can record, and I would say to people something like this. Hi, what's your name?
Harlene Appelman.
And what do you do for a living?
I work for the Covenant Foundation.
And when you hear the word seltzer water, what comes to mind?
My grandfather.
Her grandfather, she says. And how would your life be different without seltzer?
I wouldn't have the memories that I have.
I hear that nostalgia there. Thank you, Harlene. And so I interviewed over 100 people, and here's some of the highlights. Nope, back, sorry. Hi, sir, what's your name?
Bob.
What's your occupation?
Deli manager.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word seltzer?
Scotch and soda.
How would your life be different if it wasn't for seltzer?
I'd be a little drier.
Hi, what's your name?
Hi, weren't for seltzer, how would your life be different?
Well, I wouldn't have watched all those good TV shows where they sprayed each other in the face. That's about it.
Hi, what's your name?
Simple Bashir.
What's your occupation?
Taxi driver.
When you hear the word seltzer, what comes to mind?
I mean, I like salsa. It's good. It makes my my stomach feel better. You know what I'm saying? Like always, yeah, always makes my stomach comfortable. When I eat like spicy food and stuff, I drink it.
Hi, what's your name?
David Zinman.
What's your name?
Sarah Zinman.
What is or was your occupation?
I was a newspaper man at one time. I worked for Newsday and the Associated Press, and I covered, I was a medical writer.
And you, ma'am?
I was a school teacher.
When you hear the word seltzer, what comes to mind?
What comes to mind is a soda fountain and not having enough money to buy soda with chocolate in it. So I would get seltzer, yeah, for 2 cents.
Well, we didn't know anything about seltzer in South Carolina. In fact, I never heard about seltzer until I got married and moved north to live with David. So I don't really know anything about seltzer. So I'm not the person to interview about seltzer water.
If it wasn't for seltzer, how would your life be different?
Well, I wouldn't feel Jewish, I guess.
If it wasn't for seltzer, my life would not be any different.
So after a year of speaking with people, interviewing over 100, 2 things became really clear to me. One, wow, people were passionate about seltzer. They loved talking about it. Their whole bodies would be taken over by this passion to communicate something to me. And that was the second thing. That something they wanted to communicate, it had nothing to do with what the last person or the person before them had to say. It was just all these different things to talk about seltzer. And I thought, I love this passion, but what is tying this all together? I had no idea. So I put the book aside for a number of years because I couldn't figure out how to bring it all together. And then a few years later, I started thinking about the interviews, and I started noticing some themes. And the themes were in the audio clips I just played for you. What did you hear? What did you hear in those clips, the big themes? Identity, right? Ethnic identity, right? For many people, drinking seltzer was something about identity. I heard memory, nostalgia, culture. And for me, I would put all 3 of those together into one bucket. Let's hear something different that you heard. Health, right? Digestion, right? It makes you feel good. You have a stomach ache. You ate some fatty food. So you have identity, you have health. What else? If you don't have money for champagne, you get seltzer. It was accessible. Anything else you heard? Anyone notice anything about humor? Three Stooges, right? So there's humor as well. And finally, a tasty drink. And I thought, wait a second, I think I might have something now. There are these 4 larger buckets, not 100 different things. I think there's only 4 things. Let's explore those areas and see, can I find enough here to write a book? I'm now, in this next section of Seltzertopia Live, going to take you through some of the key highlights from that, starting with where seltzer begins, which is about health. And to talk about where seltzer begins, we have to talk about where on the planet seltzer begins. Is it from the US? No. We're going to Europe. Where are we going in Europe? Anyone want to guess? Germany. It's a little town called Niederselters. And here in the town of Niederselters, the water bubbled up from the ground, naturally carbonated, naturally mineralized, and people would come from all over the continent to, quote unquote, take the waters because of its supposedly medicinal properties. And this town knew it. It was all about seltzer. Here's their coat of arms. Up here on the left, that's their clay jug with the water coming right out of it. Their entire identity was wrapped around it. But why would people travel all around Europe to go to this town, to bathe in its waters, to drink in its waters? Well, here's a list of some of the things this one person said seltzer can help cure. These are old-timey ailments cured by seltzer. I don't know if you can read it, so I'll share some. We have slime nostril. We have gray tooth, the Mahoney stink. And if you haven't figured it out yet, none of these are real. This was a college student who had some fun putting this together. But the reality is, the list of things that people say seltzer can help heal is longer than this. because ultimately people say seltzer can heal just about anything. So in the 1700s, in this town, this is how the seltzer would be created. Here we have the women coming in with the empty bottles on their heads, and then they go over here, and they are cleaning them, getting them ready for their seltzer. Here's the women loading up the next load, while this man using this device has pulled up one that he just lowered. So you can see the seltzer pouring out of the jugs. And then those go over here, or she brings them over here, and these men, they have these sticks. You see he's got these sticks? Anyone know what these sticks are for? I love this. So this is the 1700s. This was not like tightly twisted tops. These were corks that were stuck in. And if the cork wasn't in just right, the carbonation was going to come out. So they would tap it very lightly with the stick, listen for a certain ping. If they got the ping, it was good. If they didn't, off with its head, bottle's not good, it gets thrown out in the back. But the ones that passed the muster, those went outside. Those went into a cart. Those, if they weren't robbed on the way to the port, would leave, go all around Europe, all around the world, and in the process, this drink got a new name. And that name of the water from the town of Niederselzers became, that's right, seltzer. So, health, first topic. Second topic, humor. Rest assured, there's a good reason why Mel Brooks said Seltzertopia is his favorite book on seltzer. So yeah, while exploring the medicinal connections, I also learned about the history of seltzer siphons like that, in comedy life, like in the Three Stooges, as we heard before, or Mary Tyler Moore. So let's take a little quick tour, starting with the Three Stooges. Seltzer first entered comedy as a prop in vaudeville in New York City. Many objects were used for humor, pies in the face, at the time, false axes in the head, also seltzer siphons. And that object of humor traveled from that stage in New York City with comedians like the Three Stooges when they went to Hollywood, into movies, and then when they went to television as well. And if you've never seen one before, it looked like this.
You like some sparkling water with your liquors? Always, yeah.
We're all familiar with that line from Chekhov about a gun on a stage. When you see it, you know it's going to go off at some point. Seltzer siphon is the same thing, but in comedy. When you see a seltzer siphon in a comedic context, you know at some point someone's going to get it sprayed in their face. It's humor held under pressure. Over time, this seltzer siphon, which was something common in households in New York City, became less common, and it became less used in comedic contexts. But there's one group that still held on to it, and those groups were clowns. When I speak to older audiences, I ask them where they first encountered clowns in seltzer, and they inevitably recall Howdy Doody and Clarabelle the Clown. But over time, again, clowns became strange also. And in fact, one episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show symbolically killed off its clown in this very important seltzer moment.
Just say something short and simple and warm. You can do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, sad news. One of our most beloved of the fingers, close personal friend of mine, is dead.
I remember Chuckles used to recite a poem at the end of each program. It was called The Credo of Clown. I'd like to offer it now in his memory. A little song, a little dance, a little seltzer done.
So seltzer makes our body feel better. It helps our spirit. It also can reaffirm our identity. So yeah, seltzer plays an important role for many people, but perhaps no more so perhaps than for the Jewish people, which led me to ask two related questions. The first one is, do Jews effervesce? Do Jews love seltzer? That was one of the questions in the beginning. What is this connection there, and if so, why? And a second inverted question, is seltzer Semitic? Is there something inherently Jewish about seltzer itself? I'm going to answer both of these questions. We'll start first with, do Jews effervesce? So where can we find this connection, evidence of Jews in seltzer? Well, here's one example. This is when Zadie was young. I always ask if anyone in the audience knows it. Not once. No one ever knows it. But a woman in the oh, yes, thank you. So a woman I met in Queens from the Orthodox community said, all the kids love this. It's kind of like a Yiddishkeit Muppet show. And this is the cover, and you'll see it says in the bottom, this is a story of growing up in the Lower East Side. And you can see by the colors, this is a beautiful, nostalgic memory. These boys are hanging from the sign. It says East Broadway. And what are they holding in their hand? A seltzer siphon. Why is there a seltzer siphon in the hand, in the middle of when Zadie was young? So Zadie's telling to his grandson his memories of growing up in the Lower East Side when things weren't as good as they were today. And back then, it was hard to hold down a job because if you were not willing to work on Shabbat, they might not be willing to keep you hired. So this one man, the father in the house, couldn't hold down a job. The family's not sure what they're going to do. They struggle throughout, but in the end, that factory catches fire. And that father is able to organize everyone in town to get their seltzer siphons and spray and put that fire out. And seltzer saves the day. But before that, it's time to figure out what they need to cut off the menu for Shabbat that Friday. Something's going to have to come off.
It will be our very best, but we have to be practical. As soon as you have a job, we'll celebrate Shabbos royally. And there's one more thing, Hyman.
Yes, Zelda.
When you go to shul for minor, please leave this note on the door of Sydney's Seltzer Place on Division Street.
What kind of note, Zelda?
What kind of note? A note to cancel this week's seltzer order, of course.
Cancel the order? You mean no seltzer? Oh, Mama, please, no. We can't have Shabbos without seltzer. That's like Hanukkah without vodka. It's like Pesach without mimosas. Like Purim without sneakers. Purim? Sneakers? Oh, Fagala. You mean Yom Kippur. What? Purim without Yom Kippur. Mama, please. We can live without the fish or chicken, but how can we live without seltzer?
You can live perfectly well drinking water from the tap. Gesundheit.
But Zelda, maybe just a bottle or two.
No, Hyman. As soon as they see one bottle, they'll want more, and I'll never hear the end of it.
But Mama!
Another word. Finished.
Yes, Mama.
Sometimes seltzer is used and expected to be understood as not being about seltzer, but being a code word for Jews. This is a book from 1981, Up from Seltzer. And as you can see from the subtitle, A Handy Guide to 4 Jewish Generations. It's actually this cover repeated throughout on every page, exploring how these 4 generations of American Jews think about different things as a topic on each page. And as we go through the book, we learn that this family, which is essentially the family we saw in the Muppets, they don't look very happy. They look traumatized. They just got off the boat, and they wish they, I don't know what they're thinking, but they're not happy. Over here, we start getting a little bit of less of a frown. I don't want to call it a smile. We went from a hat to a little yarmulke. We have this great beehive hair you can see popping up, some assimilations going on. Here we have the open-chested shirt, but a chai. We have something identifying them as Jewish. And over here, they both look almost identical with the great Jew froze. We're told they live in a commune in Vermont, and there's something specifically Jewish about them. And they're smiling, and they're happy, and they're supposed to represent the generation of the author. And again, it's up from Seltzer. This generation has come up from Seltzer. Seltzer representing everything they were happy to have left behind from their immigrant past. Right? That's the idea. Now, I said that the title is about Jews, but there is one page that talks about seltzer. It's Jewish beverage of choice, first generation, seltzer water for 2 cents plain, fourth generation, Perrier water for $2 fancy. In 1977, a drink from France had arrived in the US, and it transformed American beverage habits, called Perrier. And the irony here is that while this author is somewhat ashamed and embarrassed by the past, wanting to come up from seltzer, Perrier changed things. And many Jews looked around and said, why are we paying $2 for this fancy water from France when we've actually had this water called seltzer from quite some time? And it began a resurgence of not only an interest in seltzer, but also it was part of a generational shift in thinking about that first generation and our connections with our Jewish past. So yeah, I think we can say for sure Jews effervesce. There is a special connection. Why, we haven't said yet, but yes, there is this connection. But that leaves a second question: is seltzer Semitic? So to answer this, I explored all the reasons why people often say Jews drink seltzer. They say, Jews were kosher and seltzer was kosher. They say Jews were in the business. They said, Jewish food might require something to help you digest it. These things all might be true, but ultimately, and pardon the pun, all these reasons for me fell flat. Then I realized I was doing it all wrong. I shouldn't have been looking at why Jews drank seltzer. Instead, I should have been asking, why did everyone else stop? Right? Seltzer, mineral water, carbonated water was once consumed by everyone. But what happened? When did that change? Well, it changed around World War II, when a new drink became the drink of what it meant to be an American. What was that drink? Coca-Cola. And at that time, the things you bought could define part of who you were. There were lifestyle decisions. And part of what it meant to assimilate into American culture meant buying certain things, and it meant moving away from certain things. And many people moved away from the things that they had when their parents first came over. And Jews were no different from any other group who assimilated, but Jews often hold on to their culinary traditions and hold on to them longer than anybody else. So at a certain point in time, before World War II, I think Jews, say in New York City, could look around, everyone was drinking seltzer. And maybe by the 50s, when everyone had moved out to the suburbs, Jews might look to the left, they might look to the right, and the only people they saw drinking seltzer were Jews like themselves. And so now there was this unique connection between Jews and seltzer. And to them, the connection then became established that not only did Jews drink seltzer, seltzer was drunk by Jews. In 1958, For 2 Cents Plain was an immediate bestseller. Harry Golden wrote about his life growing up in the teens in the Lower East Side, calling his book, again, For 2 Cents Plain, not being about seltzer, but about being about Jews. And he said something in it that I think can really help us figure this out. He said, on the Lower East Side of New York, there were many traditions which we associate with the Jewish civilization until some of us began to read the literature of the world. Many things were not Jewish at all, but they report of the tradition of all mankind. Perhaps seltzer was no different. A modern scholar said something similar 60 years later, just a few months ago. He said, Judaism's material culture is littered with old technologies long abandoned by others. These technologies were usually not invented by Jews. They became Jewish because everyone else moved on. So yes, the Jewish people have a special relationship with seltzer. Jews effervesce. But is seltzer Semitic? I think the answer depends on your lens. If you're looking at the last century in America, then yes, it became Jewish because everyone else moved on. But if we broaden our lens across both time and space, I think we'll see, as Harry Golden pointed out, that seltzer is a tradition that, in fact, belongs to the world. So, seltzer's healthy, it's funny, and it's loved by Jews. It also tastes good, often mixed with chocolate syrup and milk. To make what? An egg cream.
My name is Peter Parker. My university is 1933. I'm private. I like to drink egg creams, and I like to fight Nazis. A lot.
I want that on a t-shirt. I like to drink egg creams, and I like to fight Nazis. A lot. So, what brand of syrup do you need if you're going to make an egg cream? You bet chocolate syrup, that's right. Here's an old seltzer delivery truck who had the outside paid for by You Bets to make sure they were delivering their syrup. So what do egg creams have to do with Playboy? Bet you didn't know that. And Mel Brooks. Well, in the mid-'70s, Playboy did a big interview with Mel Brooks. And in it, they asked him how you mix an egg cream. Would you like to hear what he had to say? Would you like to hear what Mel Brooks had to say about how to mix an egg cream? There we go. Pardon me a moment while I get my glasses, because I happen to have it right here. First, you got to get a can of Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup. Take a big glass and fill 1/5 of it with You Bet syrup. Then add about half a shot glass of milk. And you got to have a seltzer spout with 2 speeds. One son of a bitch bastard that comes out like bullets and scares you. One normal, regular person speed that comes out nice and soft and foamy. So hit the tough bastard, the bullets of seltzer first. Smash through the milk into the chocolate and chase the chocolate furiously all around the glass. Then, when the mixture is halfway up the glass, you turn on the gentle stream and you fill the glass with seltzer, all the time mixing with a spoon. Then taste it. But sit down first, because you might swoon with ecstasy. This is me with David Fox, visiting his plant that at the time he was the 4th generation running the syrup company. His grandfather had created Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup in Canarsie, cooking it on a pan in the kitchen, in the back of their little location. And here he is now running it with his son. And he recounted to me what happened when he first heard about his company being mentioned in a major periodical. A friend called him up and said, David, your company's in Playboy magazine. Oh, excuse me. He went out and did 2 things. One, he bought a copy for all the employees. And second, he decided, why not? I'm going to write a letter to Mel Brooks. I'm now going to read it to you. February 7th, 1975. He thought he'd be humorous. Dear Dr. Brooks, I have just finished reading your brilliant and most timely critique of the medicinal uses of Fox's You Bet, the all-healing elixir. By way of congratulating you on bringing to the attention of the medical profession, as well as to all laymen, this ancient of Hebraic potions, we wish to maintain the supply in your apothecary jars. If you would be so kind as to forward your address to the writer, we will send via eyes-only mail enough product to keep you supplied knee-deep in bubbly egg creams. Very truly yours, H. Fox and Company, Inc., David Fox, President. February 7th, 1975. Mel Brooks had 2 movies that year, cover article in Playboy. Do you think he's going to take the time to write back to a chocolate syrup manufacturer in Brooklyn? Yes. Would you like to hear the reply? Yes, here it is. 2 weeks later. Dear David, I am at 20th Century Fox. Uncle Joe was a furrier for I.J. Fox, and now I get a letter from David Fox of H. Fox and Company, makers of that dark ambrosia, commonly referred to as Fox's You Bet chocolate. It means something. I don't know what, but it means something. Anyway, I thank you for your kind offer. Money, diamonds, jewels I could refuse, but never a couple of jars of You Bet chocolate. Send it to me quick, now. Milk and seltzer are waiting. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I remain your obedient Jew, Mel Brooks. So that was 4 decades ago. Today, most millennials don't know from egg creams. When they think of flavored seltzer, they're less likely to think about 2 cents plain, You Bets, or a cherry lime Ricky. Instead, they're more likely to think about this drink that has taken the country by storm. I know, by the way, that's not a millennial, that's my daughter. It turns out, though, not everybody knows how to pronounce it. Luckily, I found this video.
This one is from Ron Bell. Hey, Jimmy, it seems like no one knows how to pronounce this sparkling water LaCroix. Is that true, or is it just me? You know, I've always thought it seemed hard to pronounce, too, so we did an experiment. We sent our writer, Arthur, down to the street to ask people about LaCroix sparkling water, but we had him pronounce it differently each time to see if they would notice. Check it out. Have you heard of LaCroix?
No.
Yeah, it's a lot of people are drinking it. Have you ever tried LA Croix?
I've tried one flavor.
Do you think you ever might try La Croix? I would love to try La Croix. Have you had La Croix before?
I have tried it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you ever tried La Croix?
Yes.
And then in London, do a lot of people drink La Croix?
I have never had that, but it looks interesting.
A lot of people are drinking LA Croix 10.
Oh, okay.
And what about Los Angeles Croix?
Love it.
Have you heard anybody talking about the choo-choo?
No.
And what is your favorite flavor of La? Have you ever had this one before, the LOL Clowns?
Heard of it, but I have not had it.
Do you think you'll ever try the Crooks?
I probably will now.
Have you ever tried Little Crud Boy?
Yeah.
Have you heard a lot of people talking about La Colored Brochet Soy? Yeah.
All right, so now that we've clarified how to pronounce LaCroix, that doesn't answer the question, what is it? Well, luckily I found another video that will explain that, and you might recognize someone in it.
Over the last decade, sales of seltzer have grown as brands like LaCroix, Perrier, and Spendrift began using social media in their marketing efforts.
When LaCroix first hit the market in the mid-90s, it was pretty much seen as a drink for Midwest soccer moms. But over the last 10 years, it's been completely transformed through Instagram as the drink of a generation. So I teased millennials before. I teased them because I love them. But what's actually true is millennials are quite familiar now with one flavor of seltzer, hard seltzer. Entertainment Weekly in December called it, where is it? One of the biggest food stories of 2019. And one reason it got so popular just last summer is because of this video, of which I excerpt.
White Claw Summer 2019, baby. If you think about it, LaCroix, it's just a version of White Claw. Yeah, I don't really know what seltzer means, but it sounds rich. If you look closely, you can see me getting barreled in that wave right there. Like a Perrier does squats. Pretty sure these are healthier than water. Ingredients: carbonated water, alcohol. You know what it tastes like? Nothing. Ain't no laws when you're drinking claws, baby.
Ain't no laws when you're drinking claws, baby. This phrase is on T-shirts. It was actually put into statements by police departments around the country saying, yes, actually, there are laws when you're drinking claws. And guess who says they outsold Budweiser last summer? Right? This is definitely a story to watch. It is growing month by month. It's quite remarkable. So, yeah, from the 18th century to today, I thought I found what I was looking for. Seltzer makes you healthy, makes you Jewish, it makes you laugh, and it tastes really good. And I thought, I got it. I got what I needed for my book. I have these 4 topics, and I thought about the 4 topics, and I thought, oh, again, they have nothing to do with each other. It was like 4 separate books. So I put it aside again, and I said, I'll come back to it maybe someday. A few years later, I started thinking about the book, and by then I was putting myself out in social media, on Facebook, on Twitter. I wanted to collect, just as I did in the beginning, people's seltzer stories. And I got a phone call from this man, John Seekings. Talk about bold, right? Bold? Yeah, talk about bold. This guy was an ad executive for PBS in Pittsburgh. He'd worked on Where in the World Was Carmen Sandiego, for those who remember that show. But on the side, he thought, you know what? There's an interesting business that's about to be sold in town. The oldest continuous seltzer works in the country, 120 years old. He knew nothing about seltzer. Wasn't Jewish, didn't have that ethnic connection, didn't drink it, didn't really watch the Three Stooges, but he thought, this is an interesting local business connected to history. Maybe I can keep it running. Here he is on the first day, surrounded by all these new seltzer siphons and the machines here to make them. These machines and boxes that are all multiples of his age, knowing nothing about seltzer, which quickly took over his life. And he contacted me to ask me, if you can see over there, that tin top of the siphon, you need a mold to make those. No one knows where the molds were. He wanted to know if I had a mold so he can make his own tops. No, I didn't have one, but I did have an ear. And for the next 2 hours, I listened to his story about how he slowly went down the rabbit hole of seltzer to become one of the Jedi masters of seltzer in the country and how it took over his life. And I thought when I got off the phone, that's what I've been missing, the human interest side. What is it that is making people so passionate? Those stories I'd heard years earlier, what was grabbing them and transforming their lives and making them want to be committed some way to this drink? And not just John, but seltzer men and women all around the country. We had Eli, who was the oldest seltzer delivery man in the country at the time, Alex, who was, I think, 24, the youngest, and others on the East Coast, the West Coast, and in between. Their story is what could make this book work, connected to all the things that I just spoke about. And now I knew I had a book. I had a story that I could tell. So it had been more than 10 years, and I knew what the book was. I had written most of it, and I contacted Carolyn to say, okay, what next? She gave me some advice about how to find an agent, how to find a publisher. Long story short, I got connected with Berman House, who some of you might know, an old multi-generational Jewish book publisher. We got to design all these different covers, and eventually I was holding the book in my hand, not the final printed book, but the ARC, the one that goes out to all the reviewers. And I couldn't believe I'd gotten that far. But now I was struck with one very sobering question. Would anyone else actually care? Did anyone really want to hear about seltzer? So here I am now at the Jewish Book Council, back where I started. I mentioned in the beginning that Carolyn Hessel had started not the Jewish Book Council, but the Jewish Book Council Network, which I will now explain to you. But first I want to ask, because of this audience, has anyone heard of it before? Thank you, a lot of people. And has anyone done what I'm just about to describe that I did? Congratulations to both of you. This is one of the strangest things I've ever done. So the way that, for those who don't know, the way this works is Jewish institutions who bring in speakers, it could be a JCC, a temple, a film series, sign up to be part of the network. And they receive something like 250 books a year. These are all authors who they might bring to their location. But for 1 week in New York City, they come and they sit in an audience just like this, and in groups of 50, they hear from the authors. The author has 2 minutes to speak. 2 minutes. They're going to cut you off at 2 minutes. That's all the time you have to about 112 locations. None of them might take you. All of them might take you. You have no idea what you're going to get. And they tell you, you can't pause dramatically like this. You can't make a pause while you make everyone laugh. You got to just keep moving. All you got is 2 minutes. I spent 2 months putting that together. And I get there for my group of 50, and usually it's alphabetical. But we had I would say a special author that day. You might recognize her, Dr. Ruth. She said, I'm the shortest in the room, so I go first. And she did, and she killed it. Of course she killed it. And now the other 49 of us had to go. And there we were, one empty seat after another, getting closer and closer to me. I'm hearing people talking about their uncle who was in the Mossad, their book about a relative surviving the Holocaust, books about the rise of anti-Semitism. And I'm about to get up and talk about seltzer water. I was getting nervous and nervous. And then a moment came, and everyone has a book. And in the book, it has your picture, it has the cover of your book, and place to write notes. And they said, up now, page 187, Barry Joseph, and the clock started ticking. Welcome to the age of effervescence. Seltzertopia, it's not so much a place, but a state of mind. Get ready, it's quiz time. First question, who am I quoting and on what topic? Psychologically, it is the opposite of circumcision. It pleasurably reaffirms your Jewishness. Mel Brooks on the egg cream. Second question, raise your hand if you enjoy a cold glass of seltzer. Thank you. I've spent over a decade asking scores of people like you one question. How would your life be different without seltzer? The response is, I'd feel less Jewish. I'd miss the Three Stooges. Life would feel flat. And that, my good people, is what Seltzertopia is all about. That passion and where it comes from and why it's taking America by storm. You all come from communities filled with people who drink seltzer or know someone who does. And few of them know the stories told for the first time in Seltzertopia. We'll explore such topics as how seltzer changed from medicine for the elite to refreshment for the masses, and the crucial role played by Jewish seltzer men and women in the process. Whether Israel used seltzer siphons as weapons in its war of independence. How Jewish comedians used seltzer to create a century of carbonated comedy. How modern debates about mixing an egg cream reflect the dynamic role of American Jews in the 21st century. And why do we think seltzer is Jewish anyway? And is it? In the end, my book Seltzertopia is all about the human side of this more than 200-year-old history. Bring me in and I can promise you, whether seltzer lover or hater, by the time I'm done, everyone will feel the fizz. I'd like to end with an original poem. Seltzertopia in your face, putting big soda in its place, spreading carbonation across this nation, filling our cups with crisp sensation. Pow, the bubbles burst on my tongue. Who knew water could taste so fun? Yeah, got it. And when I finished, people erupted into applause and laughter. And when that 2-minute timer was up and people kept clapping and the woman running the clock didn't stop me, I thought, oh, I might have gotten somewhere. I thought, maybe I did good. So over the next month, as everyone returned back to home all around the country, all the authors like me waited for those sites to let the organization know who they wanted and for them to then tell us, to see if anyone would invite me to their community. Not to talk about the Holocaust or anti-Semitism, but to spread the joy of seltzer. Well, the Covenant Foundation's project directors meeting today is my 26th talk since then. Thank you. Thank you. Which leaves us this morning with one final question, which for me is where we began. What is the meaning of seltzer? We care about our health, we care about our ethnicity, we want to laugh, we want to enjoy a tasty drink, but is there something deeper there, something that connects it all together? Well, putting the book together, for me, one of the highlights was getting to put the blurbs together and speaking with people I respected to say something. And one of them is Professor James Paul G. And what Jim had to say was, the best way to understand the extraordinary is to take a new look at the ordinary. And we continued this conversation on Facebook where he added, Seltzertopia is not just a book, it's a celebration of one of the few things that makes humans endearing. So what is it that Jim thinks makes humans endearing? Is it seltzer? No, it's not seltzer. It's the ability and the possibility for people to boldly pursue a passion that they have, to develop it with others, to share it with others. And for Jim, that's what the book was all about. This book, as I write it, is about all these people pursuing their passions in different ways, coming from different places. And for the reader, what I hope when they read the book is that it helps them not just learn something about seltzer, to give them a moment to maybe cry, maybe to laugh, but to help them reflect on where they find passion in their lives and who they can pursue it with and who they can share it with out in the world. When I do book signings after talks like this, I always sign it the same way. I write, "Find your fizz," because that's the note I want to leave in people's minds at the end. What is your passion? Find it and pursue it with others. I'd like to end this with one final word from our senator in New York.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, today, we drink seltzer. Today, we enter the third day of the Trump shutdown.
Thank you, Senator, for reminding us that before politics, before anything else, we drink seltzer. Thank you. So, Joni, do we have some time for some Q&A? So if you have a question, Joni will get you the mic. So again, say your name first, please, then ask the question.
I'm Jane Shapiro. I was going to ask you about phosphate, chocolate phosphate, which is what we drink in Chicago. With corned beef sandwiches. Yeah. But what I really want to say now is I cannot think of a better way to bring in the month of Adar than this topic about fun and ethnicity and memory and what it means celebrating being Jewish. So thank you. Yeah. But if you could answer about the phosphate, I'd be interested.
Thank you. I want to first thank you for the second piece that you shared. That was beautiful. I just came from Philadelphia. I was there for a bar mitzvah. And if you are ever in Philadelphia, you have to go to the Franklin Fountain. It's one of the few places in the country where you can get a phosphate, different than what you're thinking, but a phosphate drink. Phosphate drinks, as they were once made, as I understand them, phosphates have the ability to take something super, super sweet, like a really sweet cherry or a really sweet grape, and it cuts it. So it doesn't overwhelm you, but you can still feel it. There's something different in Chicago called the chocolate phosphate. I think that's what people call egg creams, but I haven't ever figured that. Well, egg creams don't have milk either. So there's something unique in Chicago that developed, the chocolate phosphate, that is separate from what a phosphate is, which is you can still find some places around the country. Other questions? And again, if you asked a question, you said something at the beginning you wanted to hear about and I didn't mention it, now is the time to bring that back in.
Hi,
What's your
Barry.
name, Frady?
Frady. Thank you for that. That was so much fun. We have a seltzer-loving family. And I'm wondering if you can help connect us, this work, which is so fun, and your work now with the Girl Scouts that I just heard about, which I'm so excited. How do you bring this passion alive with the work that you do in education?
Oh, how interesting. Well, I'm going to be in the panel that's going to follow this, talking about digital engagement in the household. So I'll bring some of that there. Yeah. But I think the thing I would want to share is I've been very fortunate to be employed during all of my working life. But I've never put all of my passion only into my job. Anyone who's worked with me knows I never hold back. You're always getting 120% from me. But I've always looked for the things that get me excited, that make me passionate. I love seltzer now, but when I started the project, I wasn't so excited about seltzer. It was just kind of an interesting thing. And the more I heard these stories that had never been heard before, and I realized that no one knew how it was all connected, I was like I became a food detective. I wanted to investigate it. And the more I investigated it, the more excited I got. I've never written a book before. I said I wrote for the forward, but because it was fun. It engaged me. Writing made me feel good. It releases something up here. And so exploring what it meant to write a book, well, was it scary? Yes. Was it overwhelming? Absolutely. There's a reason it took 14 years to do it. But it gave me something I wasn't getting from my work life, that my family supported, but it was something else. So always looking for these opportunities to kind of like hit all those passions in my mind has always motivated me. So for me, that's what brings it all together. Thanks for asking that, Frady. Over here. Do you mind waiting one moment for the mic? It's coming.
Thank you. Menashe Chaimov. Question is, you
put it everything together in such a interesting way, and also there's a map that you showed about all of your talks and things like that. So, what's the process is like? Do you like after each talk you come back home and kind of write something about it to kind of keep it in a folder, or you one day sit down, or I have to do the presentation and think of everything that you've been done and kind of put it together?
A process question. I love it. Thank you. These are the people who like to make the sausages. Great. So I knew when I presented, or I hoped I should say when I presented, as you saw here, that some people would invite me to come speak. And so I started thinking about what is the story, not just in the book, what's the story of the book? And how do I communicate this? And at that time, Bruce Springsteen had a show on Broadway. I don't know if you're aware. He had written a book about his life, connected to his songs, and he then did a Broadway show, which is amazing. You can see it on Netflix if you have Netflix, that gives him the opportunity to play his songs, but also tell the stories around them, so you hear the songs in a new way. And I thought, maybe that's what I should be doing. I should be presenting the key things that I think are really interesting from a stage, like showing the videos, but I should be using it to tell the story of the creation of the book. That the hero's journey in this arc is about me getting to finally present the story of Seltzer, this passion that I have. Right? So that's how it was created. And then after every single presentation and before, what I was doing here this morning, I'm always tweaking it. I notice how people respond. If something falls flat, I tweak it. The section on Jewishness wasn't working for a year. I don't think I figured it out till last November. And I still have more work to do. But I'm constantly getting feedback from how people respond, what people ask about afterwards. I'm playing with words, and I'm trying to get further and further from the screen so that it's in here and it's in here. Right? And at one point, I won't need the screen at all. For the first year, I always had it in front of me, and then January last year, I started putting the screen in the back to force me to know it in here and to own all the words and to not be saying anything rotely. But I'm always tweaking it and adapting it for each audience. And it's one of those things I love. It's where a lot of my passion has gone into now. I finished the book, but I can think about creatively how do I engage people for an hour and give them something that'll be memorable that they can take from it and apply it in their life somehow. How are we doing on time, Joni? Time for one more? That is a question I'm also often asked, and now is the first time I can say. What I usually say is, I'm just doing this, I don't have time. Or I say that I'm making a legacy board game, which is true. If you don't know what it means, ask me later. But what I can say now is, I'm saying it publicly, that means I have to follow through. I am writing a murder mystery about my town, Forest Hills, which, as of today, it stars a retiring cantor, a non-binary high school student in town, and a woman from Mexico who cleans houses in town. And the three together become a team to try and solve murder mysteries. Will it get any further than where I'm at today? We'll see. But that is where my writing passion is going right now. Thank you all so much. It's so exciting to be with you this morning.